See him yet?
Okay, Keith.
Like,
Are we good? All right.
Cameras
Start?
on.
Are we ready?
Yes, sir.
You have a cell phone?
Action.
and I gave mine.
Was that board?
The Pope has given his blessing. We can start the meetings about that. Go ahead, Jen. It's Chris.
He's gonna be a few minutes late, and he needs to leave
Hi,
shortly
Jen.
before 9 because he has a hearing at the courthouse. That's all you.
It's 8 o'clock. Call the Finance and Administration Committee meeting to order. Roll call
Keith Dirk,
here.
Steve Brenner,
Here.
Tom Moll will be absent, John Gowan will be absent, and Dave Reeser.
Dave Reeser.
Dave Reeser.
So we have 3, right?
Tune in, Dave.
Bill can fill in.
Should I say yes or no?
Yes.
John's here. How about
Yes.
How about definitely?
Adrian, it's up to you. Public comment.
Mine's on checks.
Oh, we can go another one too.
Oh, thanks, Shannon. You want to say?
No, no,
I was gonna let her go first.
No, I was saying John's here, he's at his car.
Oh, John Callan.
Allen's
Oh, he is,
here.
okay.
Yes, yeah.
All right, go ahead.
How are you? Good morning. Nothing, but since you asked me so kindly to do, I had nothing to say, but I will say now that I'm asked. It is, seems a continual issue, the failure to recognize, properly recognize a problem resident. And we've had multiple situations, me, my neighbors, again, it's impossible not to see the endless hate and bigotry that some people display.
Yeah, we've gone through this, but finance
Yes,
and
let me
administration.
finish. Yes, it's administration, yes.
Administration.
Yes. So, they're using examples, all sorts of acts, like keeping his dogs behind my car when I back up.
Which part is administration again?
The failure to recognize a problem resident.
It's you hatred.
So, so what I'm asking is simply, and I know there's some issues now between him and Greg, in which we don't know exactly what ordinances are enforced, and this is the part for administration.
Okay.
You got it?
Yeah.
I know very well, so my introduction may be a bit long, but I think it's worth it. What ordinances are enforced, what are not enforced? Can we get some sort of a guideline? Because we have ordinances, but apparently there is another secret way of what is enforced, to whom that is enforced, how it is enforced. And again, I have not seen you, and both of you are running for re-election, coming out and asking for fairness. I think your job as, as councilman is to ensure that all these ordinances and, the borough, the rules in the borough and the life in the borough is fair to every resident. And everybody gets a fair chance to, like our Constitution says, for happiness. So all we're asking is to be able to live a decent life without these persistent, continuous harassments, petty stuff. And I noticed that Mr. Jenks is bored out of his shoes. So, but yes, I would love to see more involvement of you in that matter, to recognize a problem resident. Because I see you doing it in certain situations, but not in others. And I'm trying to understand, just like with the ordinances, what's the secret code? When do we apply one, when do we apply the other? That's all, thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's turn it over to them. Okay. You guys, it's up to you.
Okay, in front of you, copy of a June 30 investment update on the screen as well. Girard Insights page, just to highlight a couple of the key items on here. So Q2 was the third quarter that we've had positive results since the market bottomed in early October. Fourth quarter of last year was up about 6%, first quarter of this year about the same, and the second quarter was up about 3.5%. So you can see the quarter numbers there, year to date. Though equities have reversed, they have not recovered all of the losses from last year yet, but they're on a good track. We'll talk about a little bit what's happened since June 30th as we get into the numbers. But part of the market commentary, everyone's familiar or is aware that interest rates have been increasing steadily for the last 12 months. You know, the Fed has raised rates more significantly and more quickly than in any other tightening period that we've had in the last 50 or 80 years. So that was all in an effort to keep inflation under control, to reduce the rate of inflation, et cetera. And it has worked. They do not believe, though, that they are done with their job. Their target interest rate is generally between 2 and 2.5% for inflation, and right now it's just a little over 3%. They paused the last meeting in terms of increasing the rate again, but it is possible that that will happen before they are completely done. But if you remember a year ago, you know, I think last July CPI report was over 9%, and that was, you know, the highest that we've seen since the 70s. So coming from 9% down to about 3% has been progress, and in order to, you know, to get to that point, your rate increases, and that's intended to slow down the economy. The economy has been very resilient, though. GDP numbers have been strong despite these rate increases. But now we're seeing contractions in the labor market. Usually the big tech firms start laying off employees first, but that is spreading more now into manufacturing and other areas. So once we see unemployment tick up a bit, you know, it's sort of counterintuitive. They're tightening rates in order to make the economy less effective or make it worse. So it'll be a good sign when unemployment goes up and the economy contracts a little bit more. But that's the ultimate objective. So that tightening has had a negative impact on the market this quarter. We finally have seen that. So summary sheet there, police pension plan. You can see second quarter return is up about 3.6%. The deposits are fairly you know, consistent throughout the year because you're making, you know, regular deposits, and about 64,000, 125 year to date because you have your schedule that you're on. Of course, the retirement benefits are significant, about 300,000 for the quarter, million one, million two on a yearly basis, and the year to date return there for 6 months is a little over 9%. July, unfortunately, July, August, and September were all down months. September being the largest, and that second quarter return has been given back. So year to date, as of September, plans are up about 6%. Next page just shows the asset allocation model there. So we have 50% domestic equity, international at 12, fixed income at 32, target, real estate, cash. The real estate suffers, you know, when interest rates change, but we have a low percentage there, so it's not as impactful. Some plans that have 5, 6, 8%, we did reduce that real estate piece in the last year because of rate increases. But the target, the pie charts there, the actual allocation is always very close to the target because we rebalance the portfolio. That's what Barry and the team does. About 2 weeks before the end of each quarter, we're looking at what areas had gains, selling off some of the gains, purchasing some of the recliners and rebalancing it so that we never get too far away from those targets. And in doing so, we're always selling a little bit at the high point and buying at a low in other areas. I'll let Barry touch on some of the funds and changes and things that we're looking at.
On the sheet, we're looking at various different returns of all the different funds, and it does get very detailed. But two of the stocks I'd like to point out on here, because the last time I was here, these two stocks were showing red on that FI 360, meaning that they were underperforming their peers. And in the small cap stocks, the one that we had mentioned was the Brown Capital Small Company. So year to date, that is up 24% as of June compared to the benchmark of 14. And last time I was here, I was mentioning that we didn't want to sell it at that particular time because of the fact that it does have a lot more technology and healthcare than the benchmark. So we're waiting for this fund to perform the way it has before we make any decisions on it. And we have interviewed the manager again. They're sticking to their process, and we haven't pulled the plug on it yet, but once it outperforms, we feel that once the Fed starts cutting rates, which will most likely be next year, that would be a time to start selling this stock. The other one was in the large cap stocks. It was the Edgewood Growth Fund, and 2022, all growth funds had done pretty horrible. And this fund is more of a focused fund. It has holdings of about 40 different stocks, so it's their best ideas. And when you take a look at a chart, for 5 years in a row, they've significantly outperformed their benchmarks. So last year, they were down over 30%. We interviewed them again, looked at their process, looked at their stocks. They're very much into free cash flow when they're rating companies and growth at a reasonable price. So you can see that particular fund is up 31%. So it was a holding that we're still monitoring, and eventually we'll replace this fund. We just felt that at the end of last year wasn't the time.
How'd they weather the third quarter?
They're doing fairly well. Growth itself has held up a little bit better than the market. But in the last 2 weeks, all of a sudden, a lot of the large tech companies are getting hit. A lot of it has to do with regulations. The SEC, or the Federal Trade Commission right now is looking into Google and Amazon, and also Apple. So there's a lot of regulations, in Europe that they're looking to try and break up monopolies. So they're looking into them, and we're seeing some valuations come down in those big names. So if we go to the FI 360 report, the other funds have held up very nicely. In the large blend, the JP Morgan U.S. equity, it's rated 0, actually in the top 2-3% of all of its peers. And we have the Vanguard Large Cap Index. The growth, you can see the Edgewood. The 3-year rolling return now is above mid, it's 32. Large value funds doing excellent, mid cap, mid value, and the small blend. The JP Morgan Small Cap Equity Fund. We have done a search. This fund generally does well, but it just hadn't been performing the way that we expected it to. So we've done a search, and a new fund has been selected. It's a Fidelity fund. It's a Fidelity Stock Selector Small Cap Fund, and we interviewed that manager. We love their process. Consistently stays with the benchmark as far as the allocations and sector, and their way of generating alpha, of course, is selecting the companies that they feel have the best cash flow. Again, another company that's looking at cash flow. So a lot of times when you look at net income, it can be manipulated, due to depreciation or appreciation and goodwill. So what they're looking at is actual, how much cash flow are they generating from operations, and how are they reinvesting that cash flow? And as we go through the other funds, the Brown Capital we're still holding. Goldman Sachs, again, another search was done. This fund held on to China for a little bit longer than it really should have. When we talked to the managers, again, 3-year rolling average, since we've had it, it has had good performance, but we felt now was a good time to do a change. And again, it was another Fidelity fund. It was a Fidelity advisor-focused emerging markets fund. Talked to that management, and what we loved about their process was that they had over 34 different analysts throughout the world. And they had just come back from Mexico. They were talking about, the investments that they're doing there, and they also have an ex-CIA agent, which I kind of like, as their political advisor for the countries. And all the other funds are doing fantastic. We're outperforming in that large cap growth area. We're outperforming in the bond area. And just a little bit of color, I did talk to Guggenheim yesterday. I do interview all the managers for fixed income, and they were stating that what they're looking at right now as far as the economy and as far as inflation is that the PCE, which is consumption expenditures, that the Fed actually looks at, they look at that more than the CPI as far as inflation, that in the past 3 months, so the last month it was 0.2%, so when you annualize the last 3 months, they're saying 2.2%, and the Fed is looking for, that 2% area. So they've seen that come down fairly drastic. One of the areas is shelter, as far as rents and home prices. That's been keeping the CPI and the PCE up. They had shown charts of rents are actually starting to come down pretty much drastically in the lower East Coast, but it was a national survey, and they said that they actually believe now that the CPI, that part of the PCE and the CPI, is a lagging indicator where rents that they're looking at is right now, that they're seeing that coming down drastically. And they feel that as far as the consensus, they're on a different, the consensus is the Fed will raise one more time and not lower rates until later next year. The dot plot is something that a lot of analysts look at, and it suggests that the Fed will lower rates 2 times next year, the second half of next year. Guggenheim believes that it's going to be sooner, and it's going to be a lot more than just a 0.5%. They feel that they're going to lower. They showed some chart that said up to 2.5%, but they said they don't know exactly, but they know that the Fed will start lowering rates faster than what is believed. So just a little bit of color of what we're looking at there for interest rates. The next few pages we can just go right through. A lot of it is disclosures, and the next is the Wyomissing Borough non-uniform pension plan. And again, we're going to see the very same returns. The difference, of course, is going to be cash flows, because they are invested at the same time in the same quantities in each of the various different mutual funds. And the next sheet would be the firefighters.
Barry, I summarized the returns.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Here's all the plans.
Okay, great.
So the more significant number on that chart is at the top there from 2022. And of course, that leads into the valuation results for 1/1/23, which is our next area of discussion. But all 3 plans are very similar. like I said, the third quarter pulled back a bit, and year-to-date, somewhere around 6%.
I think state aid would be the next item we want to talk about.
Yep, okay.
Find it. There we go.
Yeah, so Harrisburg just released the communications for state aid distribution. To everyone's pleasure and surprise, the unit value increased $647 and change this year, which was the biggest increase in quite a while. So at 83 units and another $700, that's a pretty significant, unexpected additional state aid amount that helps offset your contribution remaining. And so Phyllis created the different options for funding. You've already made 3 quarterly deposits towards the amount that you thought state aid would not cover, and there's another quarterly amount coming due, which would be on one of your motions, I think. And then, what are the options for distributing the state aid and paying the additional amount? You can see just paying the minimum amount, which would mean just satisfying your MMOs on each plan. Using state aid to supplement what we've already paid in and paying the balance of the MMOs, which combined was about $802,000 there. Second option would be to allocate the state aid according to how it was generated in each plan. Whatever hasn't been paid yet through the deposits, that additional amount to be allocated. And then option 3, that would be to just take the state aid, the extra state aid, and also make that deposit over and above what he's budgeted. We're not at evaluation timing now this year like we were at the end of last year. We decided, hey, let's add some additional funds. That helped offset some of last year's loss. But we don't have that situation this year because 1/1/25 is the next measurement date. So, sort of in my view, I think the second option is probably the best one. It would take the additional state aid that was generated by, especially the fire plan, and actually allocate it to the plan that the members generated. So, like I said, it's up for.
In addition to the normal MMO, which one is the one that would be take the additional state aid plus the MMO that we're scheduled to pay? Which option is that?
Option 3.
Three.
Yeah, I don't know why we wouldn't just do option 3, pay what we planned on paying, which is a slight overfunding beyond what's necessary, but they took such a hit.
I guess part of that discussion has to be is what is the next topic of, do we increase the MMO for next year based on the valuation from 1/1/23?
We would reduce it if you put more in.
No, because the next part of this is they're gonna say we need to increase the budget for next year's MMO based on the valuation, not considering that we're up 6% this year.
Wasn't that done 1/1/23?
Yeah, but any additional deposits this year won't affect this discussion for next year.
That's what I thought.
It will be the year
Right.
after.
Well, so what I'm saying is, if we take, I don't disagree with you, but I also then at the same time don't want to increase the MMO for next year. They're saying we're going to have to be above that minimally distressed number because the valuation doesn't reflect any increase. It reflects the decrease from last year, but doesn't take into consideration the upswing of the net 6% this year. Because this year we committed $800 and some thousand dollars, right?
Yeah, 802.
802. They're gonna tell us we need to do it to 1.2 million.
Well, it's more than that.
Yeah, and I disagree with that. I don't disagree with putting this state aid in, but I disagree with overreacting to a bad valuation from the end of last year.
But we're obligated to contribute to state aid.
The state aid
Yeah.
always goes
Totally
in.
agree,
And
totally
the
agree.
MMO is determined based on the entire plan and what you're required, what level you wanna be at.
Right, and,
Putting
but it's based on the
$69,000
valuation.
extra, we're actually only $49,000 extra, isn't
I have no problem with
gonna
that.
have any effect on what the MMO is.
Yeah,
No, it won't help us at all.
Why don't we take care
Well,
of this part
It's
first?
just to
Well-
then put the $49,000 into the, how much we have to pay next year.
I would have no problem with that.
It doesn't hurt it in any way.
Doesn't hurt.
And you have I haven't looked at it, but I assume we're throwing off the surplus as usual.
No,
No.
we're not.
Okay,
We're well into the reserves,
okay, good.
the cash reserves. And we're continuing to dig into that on an ongoing basis. And with the Public Works building, that's another $2 million that we're taking out of the reserves. So no, we're slowly eating away at that. And if we're going to continue to look at new projects, we've got to figure out either a new revenue source or we need to cut expenses someplace. And I'm just concerned that we keep putting, I don't disagree we need to fund it. I'm not arguing that at all. I just think that you guys did exactly what you needed to do the other year when the valuation was way down. But then, if you remember, mid valuation, it was over 100% funded. And then there was a concern, is it too much? Are we gonna get cut by state aid in some way? Because we have too much money in there. I don't think it's I think it's dangerous, but I don't think it's unhealthy to let it flow based on the market valuations. And until you get down to a distress level, I don't think you need to overreact to it.
But for what we're talking about
Can't
right
afford it.
now, we're discussing the additional state aid and what we want to do with it this year.
And the only reason I'm bringing this up is that my vote is partly based on what we're gonna decide about for next year.
Got it.
And if the vote is going to be to dramatically increase the MMO, then I don't wanna put this state aid in. Then I wanna use it for next year. If we're gonna,
The state aid money all goes in, we're just talking about not putting in what we decided to, what we budgeted
correct,
to fulfill the MMO.
correct. And I'm saying,
Because we
my
don't
vote,
have to, so we can go with option 2 and not put it in.
if we're
doesn't-
going to dramatically increase our contribution for next year,
That's just the determination, whatever the MMO is what it is.
no, we
We
can,
do have some options.
we have options to manipulate that number based on the assumed
Rate of
returns.
return.
Right. And
Let me frame it maybe one little different way. So the state aid generated was about $60,000 more than was expected. And if you do option 3, you're putting 69, 60 of which was additional state aid.
Part of that
So
budget
your-
fluctuation,
Your budget impact is about $10,000 more than it would have been.
why is it only $10,000?
because part of that budget fluctuation is the components of the defined contribution, which is dictated to be 10% of payroll. And as payroll has varied, particularly for the firefighters, the defined contribution is more than estimated at the end of '22. So we would meet our minimum obligation under option 1 and 2, but they would both have budget deficits because defined contribution component was more than anticipated.
So the state aid is actually just making up part
Some,
of the
some
budget
of that,
deficit?
yes.
Okay, so what do we want to do?
So the first motion has to be how to contribute the state aid, because it must be allocated among the 3 plans. And as Ron had mentioned, what we've done in the past and his recommendation is to contribute the state aid in accordance to the units that generated the state aid. even though we have the option to use some of the firefighters for the other plans, that has not been our past practice.
We have a motion for that?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Recommend to council to do that.
So after the state aid is done, the next action would be to determine what we want to contribute for the fourth quarter. And that can be done at any time through mid-December. But our options are to use the excess and contribute only the minimum. That would mean that the
Should be
fourth
option one.
quarter would be only $8,000. Option two would be to just contribute the minimum needed to fulfill the obligation for the police plan and the non-uniform plan. That would take us $36,000 over budget. The third option would be to do that plus the original 69 that had been planned. And that would take us 84,000 over budget.
It's not that plus, it's just doing the 69
Yes.
as an
Yes. So that, this contribution does not need to be made at this time, it needs to be made before the end of the year. But that's the next piece of the puzzle.
So that's not on the table to decide now.
It can be. but
It can,
doesn't
it
have
can
to.
be.
We could look into the budgeting more. and
I was gonna say,
decide.
let's wait until we get further down the line, yeah. So, is that on the agenda here?
That's the second
So
item.
I'll make a motion, we table that for now.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, so we'll table that for now and discuss it later.
The next item that affects the MMO are the valuation results from 1/1/23. Ron's provided me with summaries by plan, and I've summarized that for all the plans on this schedule. Ron, do you want to take this, or do you want me to?
Yeah, sure. Actually, could you go to my chart, at least one of them? The police. Yeah, so as we do when we're updating valuations, create a summary to show a comparison from 1/1/23 back to 1/1/21, the filed report. So the first column shows the results in the filed Act 205 form for 2021 at 7% interest, 4% salary, and using market value. Normal cost, unfunded liability, funded percentage was just under 100% at that time. The amortization amount was fairly small. Without any changes in rates or assumptions or tables, the second column shows the impact of the last 2 years. Payroll, participation, retirements, and everything impacts that to some degree, but the biggest change is the accrued liability is always marching forward, increasing with additional service earned. So that went up about $1.7 million, but the asset value not only did go up, but it's lower than it was 2 years ago. So the unfunded liability increased significantly. That reduced the funded percentage by 20%. And the amortization of that $4.5 million is $496. So without any further adjustments to assumptions or tables, your MMO is going to be $450,000 more in 2025 than for 2024. Next two columns, because you have been on a path to reduce the interest rate to get to an eventual target of 6.5, and I think you had a resolution that memorialized that. We wanted to show you two options: reduce the interest component by 0.25% or 0.5% over where it is currently. We did not adjust the salary scale because in our studies and looking historically across a lot of plans, salary tends to increase at around 4% anyway, regardless of contracts, because it's not just contractual percent increases, it's overtime and court time and shift differential and all those other components. So we feel that 4% is an appropriate long-term expectation for salary. So interest rate changes, that adds another component, the normal cost increases, about 23,000 in the first, between the second and third columns, and another 58,000 on amortization. That also affects the funded percentage. So if you combine that for all three plans, as Phyllis did in her previous chart, in the highlighted yellow, you see the original assumptions, and then each quarter point increment, and what that change does to the funded percentage. The state looks at the funded ratio for all plans on a combined basis, not just individually. And they also factor in the defined contribution plans. So those plans that are always 100% funded actually bring that up a little bit. And I don't know, in your non-union fire, did you combine them? Oh, okay. So 75.9%, 73, 71, so about 2% effect of each interest component, changing it by 0.25%. So the decision for the committee is which valuation scenario do you want us to have the actuary complete the valuations using? You're not required to change the rate. What I would say, we were having a lot of discussions with other clients who are at 7.5 or 7 3/4 or 7 1/4 currently, getting them to a 7% target. That is the most common rate across the board for our 80 or so valuations. And it's supported by the asset allocation model that we're using for the investments on a forward-looking basis. So 7% is a reasonable rate and can be achieved based on expected rates of return using the asset allocation that we have in place.
So what does that interpret to dollars?
So using the current payrolls and the valuation assumptions from the 21 valuation, the MMO increased from 802 to 837. Using the 23 valuation, that number jumps to 1,490,000 at 7%. 1,006,000 at 6 3/4%, and 1,007,000 at 6.5%.
So what are our options here, Chris? I mean, since this
When we-
obligated based on this resolution.
When we talked about, over the last few years, reducing the assumed rate of return, how was that?
There's a
voted? Was it a,
It's a resolution.
There's a resolution from 2019. Keep in mind, for the last valuation, we decreased it not just 1/4, but 0.5%.
Because
So we're actually ahead of schedule.
we were over
We're ahead of
100%.
schedule.
Yeah, so we are ahead of schedule, so we are not obligated to move it.
And this is something which can be modified. It's a policy choice by council.
Does it need a new resolution in order to do that?
Well, if you are keeping pace, and as Phil has said, you're keeping pace, or you're ahead of pace, I would say you don't need to presently make any adjustment.
So we could
But
keep it.
if you were to get to a point in the cycle where you were no longer in compliance with the resolution, then you would need to consider a new resolution.
So we could keep it at 7%.
and 25, if we wanted to continue to keep it at 7% instead of dropping,
That
then
would
we would have to amend the resolution.
That's right. That's right.
Based on the current financial conditions, I would be in favor of keeping it at 7% and not digging into our coffers even more.
Yeah.
Knowing that the valuation's gonna go back up again and we're gonna be back in the same situation again.
You never know that. That's the
The
stock
whole,
market.
giving it to these guys, you're rolling the dice anyway. giving it to anybody,
Right.
not just you guys, but giving it to anybody that's gonna invest it
So
for a
we-
return, you're rolling the dice.
we do have the option, we can select the 7% to finalize the valuation and all our compliance reports can be filed. But council approved the MMO in September using the 2021 results. We're not obligated to change that number. We can budget with that number, or we can choose to revise that number using the new results.
Oh, so we're not obligated to do that?
We fulfilled our obligation by approving the MMO by September 30th.
What does that do for us though going forward? What happens going forward then?
That's,
Is it based on a new valuation or are we still stuck with the same valuation?
when we do the MMO for 25, we will have to use these results. But we won't have to use it for
Use these
24.
results being the end of 20.
For the 24 budget, we could stick with the 837.
Got it.
But
Or
when
you
we
could
do the
adopt-
25 budget, we will have to use the valuation results from 23.
So even if we choose to increase it for 24, it won't help us to maintain anything in 25. We're gonna be stuck with a large jump in 25 regardless of what we do.
Right,
Yes.
regardless.
Yeah, and I have trouble with the, I don't know if it's an argument, but you keep making the case that by putting money into this, somehow we get punished in the future.
No,
We
I'm
never
not,
get punished in the future.
no, but it's money that,
Sitting there able to grow, it can sustain a loss too, but
If
it's
you,
almost impossible to keep up with this
I don't,
on a long-term basis.
I'm not saying that, I'm not saying it's not helping us, and it does all help us. What I'm saying is that we're taking cash that we're putting in, that we're gonna even have to put more cash in 2 years from now, regardless of what we do today.
Pensions are incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
And very, it's a huge benefit that we're obligated to fund. This whole conversation is guessing at the amortization and the rate of return. We're
don't disagree.
we're underfunded, we know that, so you always have to.
Well, we're underfunded today, we were overfunded a year ago,
That's a blip every once in a blue
But so's
moon
this.
that it happens.
but so's this.
No, typically we've been underfunded, most plans are almost always underfunded. It's very rare to go over, and it doesn't really, I don't think we ever had a result where we were
Doesn't last long.
overfunded and it impacted our state aid.
no,
You run the risk of it,
it hasn't.
you can
Correct.
also run the risk of it affecting your negotiations with the union. Oh, why should they put more money in, you're overfunded, that's a reason to not be overfunded from a negotiation standpoint, but you're almost never overfunded.
But when we did this, whenever the last term we had this, where we had to deal with the, if I remember correctly, on 1/1 of a year, maybe it was 19, I don't know what it was. We put extra funding in, and then by the end of the first quarter, the market had gone way through the roof. Now, we got the investment gains on that, no question about it. But I also agree that I don't wanna overreact to a downturn in the market. I don't like taking a picture in time, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. You know, whether the picture's rosy and the market was way up at that one point and it went way down. Flip side of the coin is, I think we may have overreacted at that one point in 19, if that was 19, I forget what year it was. But, yeah, I think there's a fine line to do here.
But what was the impact of that overreaction? That money was in the account, it's growing, it's still in there.
Yeah.
Even with the losses would be greater. This number would be higher if we hadn't put that money in. The 1.4 would be 1.6, 1.7, who
Yeah,
knows?
and last
So
year's
it
loss,
doesn't hurt you to ever put that money in.
I'm,
It doesn't, we've never had an impact on our state aid because of it.
Well, we have to make a decision on the interest rate first of all, right? So,
yeah, so just sort of recap, if you can adopt, if we finalize the valuation, you could adopt those results and revise your MMO this year to increase it. Not required, but you could do that. For 2025, you definitely have to show the higher results. So you either have a 1 or a 2-year window where you're funding at that higher level. Roll the clock forward, we do the next valuation. You can use, if it gets better, we would obviously want to use the 1/125 valuation results as soon as possible. If it goes the other way, I'll play devil's advocate, we can do the same thing. You can either adopt it that year or you delay it till the next year. But 2025, no matter what, will have the higher deposit requirement. So for today, how do you want us to finish the valuation, and then do you want to use those new results for next year's funding, or wait till 2025 when it's required?
Well, if we put in more now, could we avoid putting in as much in 2025, which is no relationship?
No, it won't affect
Okay.
the 2025 calc
Okay.
at all. You
So
don't get,
we're
you don't
not
get credit
holding ourselves.
in 1 year for another year. It only applies to the year it was deposited.
John, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I'm just looking at this from an overall cash standpoint for the entire organization. And my concern is, and I know your position is, we need to start using up some of the cash reserve. And I know once we start spending that down, but we're spending that down at a rapid rate. And at some point in time, that's gonna be a problem. And I'm looking at it for the future, and I'm just saying, how can we preserve some cash by still being fiscally responsible to this? And we keep spending at a higher rate than it's coming in. So we have all these projects that we wanna do. We wanna do the public works, we wanna do something for the police, we wanna do something for the admin. At the same time, we're adding firefighters, we're adding police, we're buying new police cars, we're doing all these other things. At some point in time, the rubber's gonna meet the road, we're gonna have a problem.
I understand all of that.
And I'm just looking, how do we balance being fiscally responsible and maintaining the proper amount in this? I'm just looking for a balance. And if it's gonna cost another $500,000 in cash, and there's a way to balance that, and maybe spend $250,000 instead of $500, I'm in favor of doing that. I'm not saying I don't wanna be irresponsible, but I also want to balance. So, where are we at? We need to decide the
You need to
percentage.
first decide on the interest rate to finalize the valuation.
I'll make a motion that we use the 7% interest rate for the valuation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. In favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nice. So,
Ron, is this all based on 20-year amortization?
20, 21, and 22.
No. The amortization
Five,
term,
10, 15.
the asset smoothing.
It's different for each, it's the average remaining life of the active membership.
Okay.
So it's different for each plan. And the police plan generally is 12 to 14 years. I mean, you have a brand new hire, it's got 25 year, and then retiring, it's got
Okay,
24
so it's
years.
done now.
It's an average of all the participants' remaining term until they get normal retirement age.
Okay.
so it's an actual, it's not theorizing.
No,
You look at the number of police we have.
Data
and
hire
their
and the
ages.
data retirement for
Okay.
each person.
When they're gonna begin to draw on.
That's an active member, yeah, and what is that average remaining period? That's how the amortization numbers.
So is it good or bad that we're hiring new younger people?
Well,
I guess it's.
pension costs for new hires are very low. When you have a 22 and 23-year veteran, pension costs escalate. You know, it goes on a little bit of, it's exponential at the very end.
Right.
So as you have an aging population, costs increase faster.
Can I ask, if you could just clarify something, Jan asked the question at the end there, and you said, it doesn't have an effect on the number in 25. But ongoing, the effect of having the money in the plan and able to grow, it affects the valuation of the plan.
It benefits
So
you
year by year
to
by
have
year.
more.
Right.
Absolutely.
And there's never a punishing factor for it. I just wanna make
It's just that we
Make
can't,
sure that
we
we're
can't
clear on
take, if you put an extra 100K in, we can't apply that to reduce the
Right.
obligation in the project.
Right.
The 25 obligation will be what it is no matter what.
And that 25 obligation will be that much higher because you didn't put it in.
No, not now, because it's based on 21.
In future years.
Yes.
The 26
From
and
one
27.
year, from
That
one,
I'm talking about one valuation away. Okay.
Right.
Right.
This number of 1.49 in that valuation would be significantly higher if we hadn't put the monies in the year that you're talking about in 2019 when we were overfunded. That number would be significantly higher now. When you redid the calculation in 21, because that number wouldn't have been in there. That money wouldn't have been in there, bro.
I don't disagree with it at all, I'm totally
So
agree with
it's
you.
a weird thing because of this 2-year increment, you think, well, it doesn't help us in next year's number. We get it from a strict cash flow standpoint.
Exactly, that's all
But
I'm
it's just
saying.
gonna hit you that much harder 2 years from
So,
now,
so what's nice,
when you do the next
Maybe.
valuation.
We don't know.
what's nice,
You do know.
Seems like.
That's why every pension plan in the country is underfunded, a lot
Right,
more than
exactly.
ours is.
you have the,
It's
like we've always
impossible
had
to
though,
keep up.
okay, we'll finish the valuation at 7%, no changes there. And if you recall from last discussions, the mortality tables are automatically incremented now with each period. So that's built in, automatic. And they're public sector tables, so it's police mortality specific and it's non-uniform mortality specific. So you have the option then though of, okay, here's your the 2025 MMO will look like the 1,490,000. But for next year, you have the option of funding more than the 837, as you always have. But you won't be locked into it unless we revise the MMOs.
And the very definition of MO is, it's the
Minimum.
minimum. And if you follow the minimum, you'll fall behind over time.
If we keep spending cash, sooner or later we're gonna run out.
Yeah, so.
That too.
What else do we need to do?
Next.
We need to decide if we are going to revise the MMO, because I need that for the budget. We need, right now, I have the 837 in. If we wanna change that number using the 23 valuation factors, we would need to budget 1,490,000. So there needs to be a motion to change the previously approved MMO, if that is your decision.
So why don't we do this, to John's point? Why don't we do the first preliminary budget?
You're not gonna like it.
Oh, I know, and we're gonna like it even a lot less if you put that number in.
Put that number in.
So put that number in.
Okay.
And when we have our first budget workshop meeting, that'll be one of the first things we look at.
Okay.
Like the 1,490.
Yeah.
I will budget 1,490,000.
Okay. I mean,
But-
and that'll give us, that'll at least give us the starting point of worst case scenario of the budget.
It's an obligation. You have to put it into your budget so that you can then figure out what optional things you want to pay for.
Okay.
And what you want to raise your taxes by.
So
Make sure you're here
That's
for
at
the
least a
first,
$500,000.
make sure you're here for the first budget meeting.
So we will table
I mean,
any revision to the MMO that was approved in September.
Well, for now, yeah, so.
And you have until the end of the year to revise it.
Right. Yeah, we'll just put it, yeah. This
So
is
that you need a
in for
motion
budget
to table
discussions.
it. Yeah.
Since it's on the agenda.
Okay.
It'd be appropriate for there to be a motion. And then it could
I'll
be-
make a motion that we table that till after the budget discussions.
Second.
Favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Anything else?
That covers our pension portion then, for the Friends of it.
I'm not sitting in your.
So in the other pension plans for the other people that you're doing, and I know this is probably a common question, where do we stand in terms of our funding efforts?
Well, your funded ratio has been better than 70 or 80% of your peers, you know, for a long time. There are very few that ever get close to 100%. But for a large plan, the impact of last year was greater. I've seen funded ratios that have come down 12 to 15% in that range. Yours was even more, you know, on the police plan. So a larger plan magnifies it a little bit more. But, you know, at 75 or 76% funded ratio, that still puts you in level 1 of the distress scoring system. Below 70 is where you don't want to be. So keep that in mind. If you're budgeting worst case scenario and you're looking at what's our minimum obligation, maybe you somewhere end up in between those two numbers and add a little bit more if you can.
And if you would take evaluation as of today with the 6% increase year to date through the second quarter, where would we be?
6% through Q3.
Third quarter, right.
So
Oh, I thought this was only through second quarter.
that's
that was
9%.
Oh,
June.
you're 6% through the
6%
third
of
quarter.
September. We need 1 more percent before the end of the year to be even.
Okay, so where would we be in our distress level?
It wouldn't change that.
Okay,
If we exactly meet the assumption, then a lot of the asset value is where it needs to be.
at the end of the second quarter, we would have been a higher.
You would have been 2% over.
Right. Oh, is that a direct 71, it would have went to 73, or that's not a?
No, not the
Right.
funded ratio, but that rate of return, if it was
Right.
9,
So where would the funded ratio
75.8.
be? Okay,
It takes a
at the end
lot
of the third or the end of the second
move.
quarter?
Second quarter.
At the end of the second quarter with a 9, with a
As of right
10%.
now, it's probably unchanged.
Okay,
If you're at 6%, you need 1 or 2 before the end of the year, it's probably right about exactly where it was.
okay.
We do update the funded ratios though annually in the GASB 68 report that actuary provides. So that gives you at least an annual, in between these active five reports, an idea of where that stands. And let me just, sometimes I get in trouble, but you know, payroll drives the benefits. So when you're having those discussions and contracts, and payroll is what creates the liability. We have no influence or impact on that whatsoever. We make an assumption about it, but, you know, and contracts now, I mean, we're seeing, you know, all over large increases in payroll percentages and stuff. Well, anything, you know, more than 3 or 4% is going to have a significant liability impact down the road. So I'll just.
And not only are we increasing our wages, we're increasing our headcount dramatically.
That's the killer.
Right.
One
We're
thing that
dramatically
we
doing
looked at 12, 15 years ago was try to keep the headcount as low as possible.
And we keep adding. We're adding to police, we're adding to fire.
What's the cost of a new hire of a police officer? Lifetime cost, about
$5
$5 million. $5
We
million.
say 4 to 5 million.
They hire.
And about that, you know, on pension too. Pay a lifetime 25, 30-year pension benefit.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
here it is, the doom and gloom report.
You guys
If
stop
only,
by.
if only we're the only one yet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take
All
care.
right, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Ron.
Yep,
Have a good
bye-bye.
one.
Is there
Thanks,
anything
Barry.
else on the agenda that you have a concern?
Start the regular meeting. I'll be as concise as possible,
Thank you.
so if I miss anything, just email me. All right. It's the abbreviated version. Cash and investments at the end of September, 11.9 million, a decrease from the end of August of 90,000. Rates at Tompkins are unchanged. Pliget it jumped just a little bit. There are 3 grants that are currently pending, total 233,000. So cash for that pending activity would be 12,166,000. On the Pliget front, during September, one term matured yielding 32,000. That brings our year-to-date interest, including bank interest, to 368,000. With a 7 million remaining in term, we'll earn another 192,000. I'm estimating the remaining interest on bank and the Pliget class at about 40,000. So projected interest is now just a little over 600,000, a positive variance of 484,000.
It's almost exactly the amount extra you owe for the pension.
Wait till we get to the next one, where it's already spent. It's already been spent, John, unfortunately.
There are two terms maturing. One is maturing tomorrow, so whatever action will need to be ratified next week. The second term is maturing on the 16th. There is currently, I believe, adequate cash to cover us for the next 90 days, so we can reinvest these items. There is one opportunity for additional interest this year. If we do a 60-day term, each $1 million will yield an additional 9,000 for the current year, or we could start to set up for next year's maturities.
Well, there's not much difference between 90 and 120 days. Well, there's no difference between 90 and 120. In order to get anything significant, you gotta go to 180, so it seems like it's not necessary to go beyond that, so I would make the motion that we just put it in for the 60 days.
Do both of them for 60 days?
That would be my recommendation. I mean, there's no real advantage doing it otherwise.
Okay.
And then we'll get that into this year, and then we'll
Yeah.
start dealing with next year.
If I've overlooked anything or something unexpected arises, we have 5 more opportunities of maturity to grab that cash. and
I think the
for
next group, then
operations.
we start moving into next year.
Okay, so I will do another 60
So
days.
I'll
at-
make that,
at
can we
18.
do that now? Can we do that, get that out of the way?
Yeah, they'll have to be separate motions because the first one that's maturing tomorrow will need to be ratified, the other one can be approved.
I'll make that motion that we do the 60 days for the
60 day.
first $1 million and ratify that at next week's council meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
The second motion would be that we invest the other $1 million, recommend to council that be invested in a 60-day rate at 5.49%. I'll make that motion.
Second.
We have a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Get all this, Melissa? Okay,
Lots of activity in September. Real estate taxes were just 33,000, but the local taxes on schedule were 635,000. We received our allocation for the Volunteer Fire Relief Association of 63,000. We received the state aid from the pension plan for 483,000. Pliget matured for 32,000. We received grant reimbursements for the 2018 Green Light Go program. The final 14,000 was a retainage, and we received the first 2 quarters of the bike share reimbursement for 14,000. An unusual transaction, the borough currently holds in escrow over $1.7 million. It's a combination of improvement agreements, stormwater management for future. In reviewing that schedule, Michelle identified a sewer escrow deposit that we were holding from Equus, and the work had been satisfied. So we were able to move the funds from escrow into the sewer account. It's recorded in the current year operations as a refund of a prior year expense. And that was for $69,000. Revenues totaled for September 2.6 million, bringing the year-to-date total to 19.1 million. That is a positive variance compared to the prior year as well as what was expected for September.
so the 69 sewer, that, you're refunding that to Equus?
No.
No, that was moved from escrow
Okay, so.
into our current year operations.
That was
Yes.
money they paid up front as part of, it actually wasn't Wawa, it was Teleflex and the medical school. They needed to enlarge the pipe going to the pump
But
station.
we're not obligated to
We
repay
did,
that.
we already
We
did.
paid
Oh,
it
we
in like
did.
2018,
Ah, okay,
19.
yeah.
go find some more.
Working on it.
Keep digging.
On the expense side, we paid street app number 4 and 5, the third invoice for the sewer televising and repair. We paid the first application for the sidewalk and the final app for water. The third quarter MMO was paid for 69,000. The 2 police vehicles arrived and we paid for them, 79,000. thousand, they're not yet in service, there needs to be equipment installed there. And we did remit to the Relief Association the funds that we received from the state for $63,000. Expenses for the month total $2 million, year-to-date $15.9 million. That is a negative variance compared to prior year. We're just ahead on our capital projects, and compared to the budget, we are under budget.
You see
On-
that happening for the rest of the year, or
No, it will even out. We were just timing wise.
timing?
Yes. On a net basis for the month of September, revenues exceeded expenses by $637,000, bringing the year-to-date total to $1,250,000. That is a negative variance compared to the prior year, as well as a negative variance compared to where we thought we would be this time. When that $1,250,000 is added to the the beginning of the year fund balance, our overall fund balance at the end of September was $13.2 million. 2.2 of that is reserved. We do have grants that are pending, as well as another $11,000 in open permit fees. That brings our unreserved fund balance at the end of September to $11.2 million. The reserves at the end of September, the only activity was to add the MS4 commitment of $10,000 and add the proceeds received from the bike share stations. I did go back and add to August, $8,500 was used of that traffic study money that we received from Equus, and that was a wayfinding sign that was installed, I believe, on Park Road.
No, that's the signs are on Innovation Way,
Okay.
that infrastructure discussed at length.
So I was not aware of that in August, so I've added that. That brings our total reserves to $2.2 million. Variances for the month of September, the 50/50 sidewalk program was finalized. Residents were billed at the net over budget of $9,000. The final quantities on the street projects was a change order to reduce the cost by $105,000. You'll see the addition of that escrow money as additional revenue for $69,000, and we paid for the duck pond aerator for $4,500. On our capital project,
Keeping in mind, though, that now you took that $80,000 of construction fees for the public works building, you took that out of
I
there
took
now.
that out, and there's a new schedule for
Okay,
that.
so that's moved over now, so that number was $80,000.
Correct.
There's where the $400,000 went down.
Just a quick recap of the capital projects. Act number 4 and 5 are paid for the streets. Act number 6, $14,492, was approved by infrastructure and is awaiting council's approval next week. The final app, which releases the retainage and wraps up the project for the year for $60,104, is pending the infrastructure committee approval in October. The first payment was made on the sidewalk project for $52,000. The final payment, which includes retainage of $32,264, was approved by the infrastructure committee and is awaiting council's approval next week. The final payment was made in September on the water project, wrapping up that for $19,000. Capital sewer improvements. The third invoice was paid for the televising for $61,000. Invoice number 4 for $26,000 was approved by the infrastructure committee and is awaiting council's approval next week. The first app for the pump station of $166,000 was approved by infrastructure and is waiting council's approval. We know at this time that the project is now stalled until the pumps are delivered, which will likely not happen till the end of November, beginning of December, if everything's on time, which means the rest of that activity will now fall into 2024.
And then we'll just move that approved funding over to reserve.
This is a new schedule for the garage project. The contracts are awarded, totaled $3.1 million. There's expected change orders of approximately 10% or another $300,000. Construction observation by McCarthy is estimated at $180,000. The administration by Berkey is an item that's on the agenda later. That would be estimated at $120,000, and furniture, fixtures, and equipment are estimated at $300,000. So the potential total cost of the project would be just over $4 million. Already incurred for that project in '21, the original design totaled $166,000. Year to date, we have spent $96,000 for the redesign and the architectural studies. There is grant funding, as you know, available for this project from RACP. I don't know what the acronym stands for.
It doesn't make sense, but it's the capital assistance program. I don't know why they do the,
Yeah, they used to call it RCAP,
Yeah.
but now they call it.
The reimbursement for those expenses are only construction costs are eligible, and they will only be received once we occupy the premise.
It can be a lag of up to 2 years, just so
Ouch.
you're aware.
I was not aware of
I'm
that.
very involved with Albernia with all the money they've been getting.
that's not what our grant writer or lobbyist have indicated. I mean, they basically said if the project's done in '24, assume reimbursement in early '25.
That hurts my budget.
It's been closer to 18 months.
I mean, I'll follow with Colleen on that.
So, what,
So there, go ahead.
sorry, so the soft costs are not eligible for the reimbursement?
No. They count towards our match, but they are not eligible for reimbursement, only construction costs.
But it goes against the 50% match?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So with the Berkey in there, we're now at $4.3 million for the project,
4.0, or we
No,
say
plus the
equal.
soft costs.
but plus the soft cost.
Soft costs.
So we're at $4.3 million for the project.
Yeah, because we've already expended the 266.
Right. So where did the dollars we spent for the soft costs, where did that come from?
They came out of operating funds.
Okay, so that's net of the budget. So that's one of the over budget items,
It is,
contributing to the over budget items.
it is, but I removed it from the variance schedule.
Right, right,
Right.
okay. So you're saying, John, you're saying that you think it could be up to 2 years before we get half of that money back?
The state reimbursement are running up to 1.5 years for Albernia.
So we're not
They
gonna
have
be able to
multiple
submit.
RCAP funds for all the work they're doing, Pottsville, Collegetown, all the different places.
So we can't get
They're doing it
reimbursed for
all.
anything until the project's completed.
Bridgeline,
Correct, but
they're doing it all in
I'll-
Bridgeline.
I'll talk to
Or
Colleen
from
as
operating account.
she administers a lot of these. No offense to whoever's running Albernia's program, but I would ask how they're submitting, what they're submitting. I have not seen that lag with anything. No, we've not done this particular grant program, but the other grant programs we've submitted reimbursement for, I would say there's actually a pretty quick turnaround.
So keep in mind for the budget, as we get a payment out and we need to reimburse the vendor or contractor, there'll be an offsetting revenue as proceeds from debt are recorded.
But you're saying we can't submit it till we're occupying the building?
That's
The
what we're
project
talking.
has to be 100% complete so you can submit for reimbursement.
Correct.
That's how most grants work. Project has to be fully complete. They're reimbursable, not.
So our half of the project won't come back until we're completely finished,
Correct.
which probably could be 25. So what are we doing as far as we don't have a line of credit, we have a short-term spending.
A bridge
short-term
loan.
We have short-term debt.
So where are we at with that on
Right
this
now,
project?
Right now, it's at 0. As we advance on it, we'll be recording proceeds from that loan as a revenue source.
Well, we already have $262,000
That's already paid for from out of operating.
understood, but we could go back to that line. We can borrow from that line anytime we want for any reason.
You good?
I guess,
So we could start this, John, I don't know if you were here at the other meeting, the philosophy would be to hit that line at 2.95 as much as we possibly can and continue to leave our money in Pliget and gain the net. So I think what we should be doing is we should be taking this entire project and every penny that we can save out of our cash funds should hit the line.
so are you suggesting go back to
Yes.
what was expended in '21?
I would say hit the line for this whole project because eventually half of it's gonna come back to us from the state. And at that point is when the plan is to pay down, we have until April of '25 to pay off this short-term line,
What's the size of it?
$7 million.
7.5. That's 7.5.
So I'm saying take as much as we can and not use any of our cash reserves until we have to, and pay off the line when we get reimbursed from the state, and then use our cash reserves to pay down. I mean, it'll be zero on March 31st, 2025. And until then, we maximize it. I mean, as long as interest rates are that high at Pliget, I think we'd be remiss in not taking advantage of the difference. I mean, if we can save on $4 million project and keep investing it there, I mean, the difference between that's gonna be close to $100,000.
So do you wanna amend the agenda to pass a motion?
I don't know that-
For me to advance on the line? Do you think that's necessary?
I don't know that we have to do that. I mean, we did this in the last week.
Let me ask the question of Chris after the meeting, and if need be, I can put it under my manager's report.
Yeah, we have time. I mean, it's not an urgent situation for today, but I think the consensus has, I mean, we have a, yeah, I think it's been already discussed and already approved
Okay.
to use that line. Melissa, remember that? Yeah.
The question would be, how much of that 7.5 are we gonna use? If we're gonna use all of that without taking the soft costs, then maybe we should just ignore the soft.
Well, we're only gonna
But
use
we don't know.
4.3.
Right.
We have
but-
7 million.
But we also have other things coming along, which we're gonna hit.
I don't think the intent was to use that line for anything other than public works.
Oh, really?
I mean, that's,
Oh,
I mean, that's what we got it for the longer, any projects, when we submitted the application to apply for it, it was for future projects. And since it's only good now until April, that's the only project we really have going that we know is gonna come to fruition before.
potentially.
I'm not sure that's gonna be,
Well,
I'm
yeah,
not sure that's gonna happen before April of
potentially.
25.
Yeah, I
I
know.
mean, considering the public works isn't potentially not even gonna get finished until 25.
25, yeah.
I doubt anything we're still in the planning stages of is gonna get done before
Construction's
25.
supposed to,
Construction for public works starts in November.
yeah.
Yeah, but are we gonna be completed like the end of 24?
That's the plan.
Yeah. Okay, good. I hope we're on.
Sooner the better, we get it back faster.
Yeah,
So in addition
I
to.
just think it's cleaner if we say,
Yeah, I agree.
this is,
If you're only having it for the public works, I thought we'd use that for different.
well,
things.
depends what it is. Depends what it is, I mean,
I think we gotta use that money at 2.95%.
but remember, it's only good until April of 25,
Right,
so we only have it for 18 months.
yeah.
Yeah, who's it with?
Tompkins. Yeah, we locked that in, at the time, it seemed like a high rate,
Yeah.
and 2 years later, it sounds like a pretty good deal.
Capital expenditures for the month totaled $512,000 and included just the police cars and the payment apps discussed. The tax collector reported collections in September of $27,000, bringing the year-to-date total to $4,570,000, or 96.9%, leaving 3.1% remaining, or just $145,000. Together with collections received in September from August, gross real estate taxes totaled $30,000. That $30,000 plus the penalties brings our net real estate taxes for the month to $33,000, and year-to-date to $4.6 million. My best estimate to end the year, we will end the year at $4.7 million, or just about 19,000 over budget. Local taxes for the month of September totaled $635,000, bringing the year-to-date total to 4.7 million. I'm projecting that we end the year at 5,667,000, or 365,000 under budget. Real estate transfer tax for the month of September, we received 39,000. I've not yet received the information for the October receipt of September activity. We have been made aware of potential commercial properties that may sell before the end of the year. That information, I'm experiencing delays from the county currently. I haven't received August delinquent taxes yet. I haven't received this month's report. So even if the sales occur, I can't.
Sales pending October 16th, and it would be a substantial transfer tax.
But I can't count on receiving that transfer tax in November.
Do you think we're gonna come up towards the budget or surpass the budget?
I believe if these receipts come through, we will surpass the
700,000.
transfer tax, yes.
And which property is that?
Can't
I
say.
don't know that that's public
I
information.
can't say it publicly.
Okay. Yeah, that's, yeah, sorry.
Earned income tax for the month of September total 476,000, already received in October 177,000, bringing the year-to-date total to 2,545,000. I'm estimating that we will end the year at 3 million or 200,000 under budget. Mercantile tax for the month of September total 11,000, bringing the year-to-date total to 1,475,000. I'm estimating that we will end the year about 10,000 over budget. Local services tax for the month of September, 107,000. 2,000 has been received in October from September collections. I'm estimating that we will end the year at 575 or 25,000 under budget. So with all the information available through the end of September, my best guess to end the year, we have budgeted revenues of 21.5. I'm estimating that we will end the year with revenues of 22.6, a positive variance of 1.1 million. We know that interest is over budget by 484. We received from the Highland the cost sharing of 300,000 for the West Lawn Interceptor. The Benetcon reimbursement exceeded budget by 130,000. All other items are netting to about 200,000. Expenses were budgeted at 24.9 million. I'm estimating that they will come in at 23.4, a positive variance of 1.5. Two big pieces there. The West Lawn Interceptor, we budgeted 650,000. None of that will occur this year. And the portion of the pump station that was budgeted this year that will be delayed into 24 is at 604,000. All other items are netting to 269,000. So I am estimating that expenses will exceed revenues by 746,000 at this time. That would bring our overall fund balance to 11,239,000, where we had our comfort level when we passed this year's budget was 8.3 million. So we have a swing of 2.8 million.
So, but we're gonna add to our reserve, some of this is gonna be added to the reserve, so what's gonna be our net of reserve?
I have not analyzed reserves yet, there's too many moving
Okay.
pieces right now.
So, you think we're gonna be better than the 7.2 projection at this point?
Better, yes, but we will use some of the reserves.
Okay.
What we know about 24 rates at this time, as Ron alluded to, the CPI is at 3.7 for August. September hasn't been released yet. That's about half of what it was last year. Even though that is only at 3.7, the Water Authority has informed us to expect an increase at a minimum of 9.75%, possibly up to 12.5%. Dave, any comments there?
Yeah, we're finalizing that. Again, you aren't selling more product and your costs keep going up. And until we get an answer to that, it's just gonna keep going up. Now, the other big issue is we plan to spend over $20 million. The plan's 50-some years old. We have an engineering study just about finalized. So what we're trying to do, that's gonna increase our debt service by $1 million a year. maybe in 25 or thereabouts. So we're trying to pad that a little bit, instead of having it in one band, just take a little bit at a time. So we're talking 9 to 12%.
So that gets passed on to the consumer, right?
That's your choice, what
That's
do you
your
do with the
choice.
rate?
Yeah.
That's what we did this year.
The JMA's sewer treatment charges, there will be no change for '24. The refuse contract, as it's a multiple year contract, has a 1.8% increase for 2024. The Animal Rescue League costs are doubling. It's going from $1.25 per capita to $2.50 per capita.
And they've already warned us for 25. It's gonna go from, I think we're like at 27.5, we're close to 30,000 for next year, I think it was. For 25, it's gonna go up to close to 80,000, so I think we'll need to
And they won't
revisit.
pick up the cats on Dolphin Avenue.
They will neuter them though.
Medical premiums are actually decreasing next
Put it in
year.
the door. They got their foot right in there. And now it's a ratchet.
Yeah.
It only goes one direction.
Yep.
Medical premiums are decreasing next year. The single cost is going down 1.5%, the family cost 1.07%. There's no change to life premiums, and emergency management there's no change for next year. Built into the contracts, the police and fire will be going up 3.5%, public works 3%.
Okay.
So, I will take all this information, continue to update it as information becomes available, and have the first draft ready for our next meeting, which is scheduled for October 18th. That's a Wednesday at 8 a.m. Right, that's everything I have in less than 20 minutes.
Can you go back-
Pretty good, Phyllis,
Can
thank
you
you.
go back to the fund, the expense and the fund recap? So the 2.672 is the variance.
Yes. We had anticipated a deficit of 3.4 million, and I'm estimating a deficit of 746.
What was, I mean, that's pretty typical.
Well,
What's
we had some bigger bills that we budgeted that didn't happen.
Right, which has been happening for
Yeah.
the 17 years I've been involved here.
But some of these projects are gonna happen next year, some, they're already in the works.
Right, just like they did the year before, and the year before, and the year before.
He said October 18th.
A real simple way of looking at the budget is everything's going up 3.5%, carries 3.5% of your
Yeah.
expenses.
Budget meeting, there's special budget meetings.
Tax increase in revenue of some sort.
I think when we look at the budget, I don't think it's gonna be a problem to spend it. I mean, I think this is somewhat misleading in that some of these projects, like that West Lawn Interceptor, some of these other things that really aren't just gonna get kicked down the road anymore, they're gonna use cash next year.
And that's
It's
assuming
already
we
in the
get,
works.
we get
So I
half of
agree
that.
with you, there was,
So we're gonna
in
put
the-
them into the budget, and if the budget doesn't work, you remove other things from the budget. You don't do certain street projects, you don't do another sewer project, I mean, it's just how
I
it
think what we're
works.
gonna find when we do the budget is that because of the other expenditures that we've already committed to, by increasing the police force, agreeing to this new union contract with the firefighters, I think you're getting to the point where it's not just a question of which streets don't you do, it's do you do any streets at all?
That's the dilemma of public government
Exactly.
everywhere,
So
that's why infrastructure suffers.
And then you're kicking costs down the road, who are you kidding? You know, if you let the roads go to hell, then it's gonna be a massive catch-up.
Or you do large capital expenditures with long-term debt or bond issues,
Right.
and that's something I
instead
think
of
needs to
using
be,
cash for it.
and I think that's something that needs to be discussed.
Yes.
Especially with, as we continue to talk about the next subject, which is the police and administration facility.
Yeah.
I think at some point in time, we need to start thinking about some long-term debt,
Yeah.
because at some point, they're just gonna run out of cash.
But we want to get to work on that right now.
I mean, we did a big step this year by doing this public works thing, which turned into a $4 million project.
It's nice we got the RCAP funding.
Yeah, exactly, but it's still $2 million worth of cash that came from somewhere.
You definitely need to check with your consultant on the reimbursement, so you know what we're
We got-
likely to incur on the.
We've already
Operation
had that
mix.
conversation,
So I got-
not
All
recently.
right, we're number 7,
This
Keith.
has
But
been
I'll
a very
follow
recent
through.
conversation for me too, and I'm learning
Keith, Phil's
because
just
I'm on the
on-
finance committee
Oh,
there,
sorry.
and they're not getting reimbursement. They have a consultant,
Right.
we've got.
Hold on, I-
So we're on to number 7. I'll make this brief. So I read this a couple times, and I'm trying to get my head around where we're headed with this. And I know what the discussions were, and I keep reading this from Meister Cox, and I keep seeing us going down the rabbit hole of how do we refurbish this building? And that's not where I think we want to go. I kept trying to think of the words. I think we want to repurpose the property. We want to look at repurposing the property. And I don't think this does that. My recommendation is we kick this back to infrastructure. And my recommendation would be that we get a small workshop group together with the architect, with some council, with the borough manager, with maybe the chief of police, and brainstorm, what do we really think we can do here? And open up all the options. This is going down the same path we went down before. It's gonna come back, and we're gonna spend $17,000 to come back and say, this building isn't ADA compliant, the windows are leaking, you need to spend $10 million just to bring it up to code. And that's not what we want. I think we want a creative solution to say, is there a way to utilize this piece of property and fulfill the needs we have? Does that include building a new police station in the front? Does that include building a 2-story building in the front of the building that has police and administration? Does that include building a police station and gutting the police department wall to wall, just completely gutting it and putting in a new administration building there? This isn't accomplishing that.
Meister did understand that when he put this together. I
That's-
mean, he at least understood we are not looking at doing something within the box of this building, and there would definitely need to be a new building
I
built somewhere.
think it needs to be, I think there needs to be some sit-down discussions.
I don't disagree with that.
So my recommendation is to table this for now and move to infrastructure.
Perfect.
Move it back to infrastructure. And then we can talk about it some more at length.
I don't even know if you want to keep it on infrastructure until we can get a meeting together with, like you said.
Well, I think it's gonna have to come from infrastructure to recommend,
Who that
To get the
subcommittee
meeting,
is.
get the meeting. And I don't think it's up to us to do, I don't think it's finance to do that.
I'll second that motion.
So we have a motion to table that for now and move back to infrastructure. Favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I think we already talked about the public works. Do we need to,
You actually need to approve Berkey's contract.
I think we recommend to council that we add to the project, Berkey's oversight recommendation. What are they calling that?
Construction management.
Construction management, which I'm not sure why we didn't have included in the first place. I know, but I don't know why we didn't
That'll
have it.
help you collect the funds too.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So I'll make a recommendation that we recommend to council to add this to the public works project.
Second.
We have a motion and a second in favor. Aye. Opposed?
Is there any preference to when those invoices come from Berkey, they can either come directly to us or they can be run through McCarthy's as part of their construction observation?
Why would we want to run it through McCarthy?
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah,
We
I
were just
mean,
given the option
I
and
think they should come directly to us. I mean, that there's no point having them filtered and then having any kind of question that he's adding any cost to it unjustifiably. So I think it should come to us.
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna pay for the whole project, like, you know, that way we keep track of it with our needs.
When does it start?
Mid-November. Pre-con scheduled for next Wednesday.
So where the other one is?
Yeah, but just over the
Adding on,
driveway.
fixing it.
Yeah, just over the
I
driveway.
think that did we sell off that lot that turned into a daycare center? Or whatever that was in front,
Dr. Evans?
the doctor's office? Do we own that lot?
that I'm aware of.
Do we own that?
I thought we did at one time.
We own a lot
Not
across
since
the
I've
street
been
with a
working.
multi-modal lot
For
of
8 years.
Moving on, Fourth and Ole Streets Pump Station flooding.
This is just an update as to, overall cost, what insurance is gonna cover, and then what out of pocket is, which is not great news.
So the deductible of 50,000 I have added to our variance schedule. We already received the first check on that.
So no action required, you're just informing us.
Correct.
Okay.
Was that submitted to voucher?
I believe so, but FEMA didn't approve the,
But it's still FEMA now, we can still, you know. FEMA did not. FEMA,
I'll double check with Jim, but I'm 99% sure he sent all of that information.
Is there any old business to be brought before the committee?
I would ask that the entire board packet be included with the agenda on the website.
Thank you. Been asking this for a long
Anybody?
time.
You would need to make a motion to amend the agenda if you want a motion for that. Sorry.
This is only recommending it to council to do it.
Correct, but you still need to make a motion to amend the agenda to make the motion. I know.
Somebody wanna make that motion?
I can't come on.
I'll make a motion that to amend the agenda to discuss recommendation to include the board packet on the website. Second? We have a motion and a second?
Yep.
All in favor, aye? All right, go ahead, just say it. Yeah, you think it's a good idea. Anything else you wanna say other than, yeah, it's a good idea?
Been asking it for 3 years.
Okay. Public comments over. So, what do you wanna talk about?
Yeah, what
Is
do you-
there an issue
what
with
do you
doing that?
suggest? What do you, yeah.
Is there a, Melissa, is there a problem doing that?
The website can accommodate it, it's just, I think in general, council needs to take a position moving forward, what do you want from each committee and council packet available to the public online? Because right now, like, next Tuesday, council's gonna approve, or currently the draft council minutes from the September meeting. I mean, there is an option in those 4 weeks between every meeting that somebody could request a revision be made, and that has happened. So we can put everything up there with draft, that's fine.
I don't see any problem. I mean, we're sitting here talking, we go to the council meetings and we talk about it. What's the difference between sitting, talking about it versus having it open to the public?
I think if we just say, you know, this is subject to revision,
Right.
okay, up to last minute revision, and made aware that this is pending approval.
Right.
So this isn't gospel, this is just all
Draft.
Subject to.
pending, subject to approval of council.
And there's only 5 people out of 11,000 that care anyway.
Right,
One here.
yes.
But everybody understands, this is draft.
2 here.
Two here.
You see?
Okay, so there's 3 others. 3 others out of the 11,000 that care.
And just to be.
I have no problem.
Just to be
And-
clear, there are some things that may be in your, say, council packet or as part of a meeting agenda, we're not gonna put on the website because it's copyright protected,
And
so,
personnel related.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's understandable.
So
Right.
with the exception of that, I would ask that
Okay, so let's move this discussion on to council and let council decide.
And then do you leave up old approved, or whatever you want to call it, minutes and other packets?
I think not to not hog up the website, because it's very clean and streamlined the way that it is now. Melissa knows much better than I do, if she can either organize that, you know, all of 2023 lives here, all of 22, do you really need to go back more than 2 years? No.
Any other old business? Any new business? Hearing none? Make a motion to adjourn. Need a second.